If you're planning on applying for university this fall, now is the time to start preparing for the TOEFL English exam. But the trickiest part of this test isn't necessarily about your English capabilities. It's actually the timing. So today I'm going to share with you my top 5 TOEFL timing tips for the TOEFL speaking section so that you can ace the TOEFL exam and get into the university of your dreams. I've helped hundreds of students prepare for the TOEFL English exam, and the most common issue they face is adequately answering the TOEFL speaking questions in the limited amount of time that's provided. I'll be honest. Even though I specialize in helping students prepare for the TOEFL English exam, I don't feel like this test is the best measurement of someone's English aptitude. This test is so fast-paced that, unfortunately, students need to rely on using test-taking strategies in order to get a decent score on the test, rather than actually showcasing their true English comprehension skills. With that being said, most universities in the United States do require international students to submit a decent TOEFL score in order to get accepted into their programs. So unfortunately, it is necessary to take this exam. So before we jump into my top 5 tips, let's do a quick review of how the TOEFL speaking section is structured. You'll first start out with the independent speaking question, which is where you'll share your opinion on something or share some kind of personal story. The independent speaking question is usually related to school, work, or travel, or some other part of your life. You'll first see the question on the screen and it will be read out loud to you. Then you'll have just 15 seconds to prepare your answer and then only 45 seconds to provide a response. Yeah, it's pretty damn quick. The key thing to remember with this question is that there is technically no right answer because you're talking about your own opinions and experiences. So feel free to lie about your answer. It doesn't matter if what you say actually aligns with your personal opinions or if it actually happened in your life. The only thing that matters is that you provide an answer that is grammatically correct and contains information that's appropriate to the prompt. You don't have to be truthful about your own life experiences. After the independent question, you're going to move on to the integrated speaking section. With these 3 questions, you'll have a combination of listening and sometimes reading, along with your spoken answer. Your first integrated speaking question is all about university campus life. In the first part of the question, you will have to read some kind of university announcement, or it might be a letter to the editor in the university newspaper, and it will talk about a change that will happen or a proposed change to the campus. For this reading part, you will only have 45 seconds to read the entire passage and pick out those key details that will be important for your response. After that, you'll have to listen to a conversation between 2 students where they'll be sharing their opinions about the text that you read. After the listening section, you will then see the question on the screen and it will be read out loud, and then you'll have 30 seconds to prepare your own response, and then only 1 minute for your spoken answer. But here's a little bonus tip to get extra time with your answer preparation. The convenient thing about these university life questions is they're all basically the same. The question will always be, the man or woman expresses his or her opinion of the university's plan. State his or her opinion and the reasons he or she gives for holding that opinion. It's always going to be that same sentence structure, just focusing on the man or the woman. So because the question is always the same and it's pretty apparent during the listening section who you need to focus on, because one of the speakers will always do the majority of the speaking, you don't really need to pay attention during that question section. So you can use those extra 10 to 15 seconds and add them into your preparation time, therefore getting about 40 to 45 seconds to prepare your answer. While this doesn't seem like a lot of extra time, trust me, it makes a huge difference. The next question is basically the same format as the university life question. So you'll have 45 seconds to read some kind of passage. You'll listen to one speaker this time, 30 seconds to prepare, 1 minute for your spoken response. However, the content in this question is quite different. So the reading portion will be about a general concept, and then the listening portion is an academic lecture that provides more details and examples related to that concept from the reading section. And the great thing about this question is my bonus time-saving tip also applies. The prompts for these questions are basically always structured like this. Using the examples from the lecture, explain the concept of whatever the topic was in the reading section. That's it. So as long as you basically understood the topic in the reading section, you can totally ignore listening to the question and use the extra time to prepare your answer. And the final integrated speaking question is the academic lecture. This one is a little bit different from the previous academic lecture question because there is no reading portion. All you have to do is listen to an academic lecture, but because there's no reading, you'll only have 20 seconds to prepare your 1-minute answer. So my bonus time-saving tip can sometimes work with this question, but I would only recommend using it if you're really confident about what the topic and details were in the lecture. If not, then you should pay attention during that time when the question is being read out loud to you. Okie dokes. Now let's jump in to my 5 TOEFL time-saving tips. My first tip is to practice with a timer, but not at first. I always recommend to my students that are just beginning their TOEFL journey to first just get comfortable with the general structure of the answers. Like I mentioned before, in order to adequately answer the TOEFL questions in the short amount of time, your answers are generally going to be kind of formulaic, and they'll usually follow the same structure each time. Now, I don't necessarily recommend using templates to create your TOEFL spoken answers. I'll be posting a video pretty soon about why I don't recommend TOEFL templates, but you should definitely check some out and research some different example answers just so that you can get an idea about how to organize your own answers. After you get comfortable with the organization and the structure of your TOEFL speaking, then you should start timing your responses with a stopwatch just to see how long you naturally take to answer the questions. What I mean by this is when you start answering your question, hit that stopwatch and then set your phone down. Answer your question in whatever way feels natural or right to you, and then when you're finished, check your stopwatch and see how long it took. This will give you a good idea about what you need to focus on to optimize your TOEFL speaking answers. So, for instance, some people speak very quickly and they don't end up using the entire time provided to answer their questions. So, for those people that speak quickly, they would need to focus on either slowing down so they can have a more natural pace, or maybe they need to take a look at their pronunciation and flow because if you're speaking so fast, you might not actually sound very natural. Or if they have a lot of extra time, then they really need to focus on adding more details and examples to their answers. On the other hand, if a student is taking a really long time to naturally answer these questions, then they need to look at a few things, such as, are they just speaking very slowly? Are they hesitating a lot with their answers, with a lot of so, they need to try and build some confidence. Or are they just talking too much? Because that can also happen. So, as you're checking your natural time for answering these questions, you can look at the average amount of time that each question is taking you to answer, and that becomes your baseline time. When you have that baseline time or your average time, then you can look at those details to see what needs to be corrected. After you get your baseline time and you've figured out what exactly you need to fix in order to make your responses shorter or longer, that's when you need to start actually timing yourself using the time that will be provided in the TOEFL exam. So that means setting a timer with the exact time that will be allowed on the exam and not using that stopwatch anymore. And that includes preparation time. You need to time your prep time. I have had far too many students that have not practiced this skill before they started TOEFL lessons with me, and trust me, you're really going to screw yourself over if you've never actually practiced with the real times that are provided on the exam. Along the lines of practicing with the allotted amount of time in the exam, you have to keep your eye on the clock. I always recommend that my students follow my signature 10:30 rule. By following the 10:30 rule, you should have approximately an even amount of time for your first and your second detail in your spoken responses. And the awesome thing about this rule is that it applies to all four answers. The 10:30 rule goes like this. You start wrapping up your introduction as soon as you see the clock hit the 10-second mark. That doesn't mean that you have to completely stop your introduction by the 10-second mark, nor does it mean your introduction has to even reach the 10-second mark. It means that when you see the 10 seconds, that's your cue to finish up that intro as quickly as possible so that you can move on to your first detail. You should really never spend more than 15 seconds on your introduction for any of your TOEFL speaking questions. So by keeping an eye on the clock and making sure you finish things around the 10-second mark, that will give you about 5 seconds of wiggle room between your introduction and your first detail. At the 30-second mark, that's when you need to start wrapping up that first detail and moving on to the second one. Again, this doesn't mean that your first detail has to be finished at the 30-second mark. It should just be used as an indication for you to finish it up and move on to your second detail. You really need to make sure that you have a minimum of 15 seconds at the end of your response for that second detail. If you continue speaking and going, and only leave yourself 10 seconds at the end for your second detail, you won't be able to provide enough details and examples to have really any decent topic development. Now, there are going to be times where you maybe go far past those 10 and 30-second marks, but you should use the 10-30 rule as a nice little guideline for when you move on to those next details. I don't care what other YouTubers or TOEFL templates tell you. You have to stop saying "for 2 reasons" in your introduction sentences. This is a huge mistake that all of my students do before they start their lessons with me. So why do I strongly recommend against it? Because it sets you up for failure if you forget your second detail, or if you don't follow my 10-30 rule and you run out of time. Here's the thing. Mistakes happen. You might get some test anxiety, or you might just not watch the time. So you need to allow your answers to have a little bit of flexibility in them. So if you say "for 2 reasons" and then don't provide that second reason, you are clearly showing the scorer that you made a big mistake and you are not able to fully answer your question. And we don't need to be pointing out our own mistakes on the exam. So here's an example of how saying "for 2 reasons" can screw you over if maybe you get a bit of test anxiety and forget your details or run out of time. Let's say you have an independent speaking question that asks about your dream vacation, and your answer goes a little something like this. One day, I would love to go to Bali for 2 reasons. The first reason is that it has beautiful beaches. I've always dreamed of lounging on a tropical beach and listening to the relaxing waves of the ocean. I've also heard that they have some amazing seafood restaurants on the beaches that serve tasty fresh seafood. The second reason is that Bali is, it's, oh, So, can you see why saying "for 2 reasons" really messed up the question? You clearly showed the scorer that you were supposed to give 2 reasons, but then you somehow fucked it up. And also, saying "the first reason is" and "the second reason is just so lame. There are much better and more advanced transitional words and phrases that you can super easily plug in instead of the lame "my first reason is" and "my second reason is." So, what should you do instead to create a better independent speaking answer? You should structure your introduction sentence like this. One day, I would like to go to Bali because, and then go into your first detail without saying anything about reasons or whatever. Then after that, when you go into your second detail, you should use a better transitional word or phrase like "in addition," "furthermore," "moreover." There are a whole bunch of options that you could use. The great thing about this "state your opinion because" first detail and then "furthermore," "moreover" second detail kind of structure is that it gives you so much flexibility in case you run out of time or run out of ideas in your answer. So for instance, if you cannot come up with a second detail, you can just continue with more examples to go along with that first detail. It's so much better to say something rather than nothing. I know all the templates and examples online will tell you that you have to do 2 details plus 2 examples, but sometimes that doesn't happen, or you have a brain fart and you just can't think of a second detail. So you're much better off giving one juicy detail with some tasty examples instead of doing 2 half-assed details, or doing one detail and then having silence or ums and ahs for the rest of your answer. So with this more flexible introduction sentence, your new answer could go something like this. One day I would love to go to Bali because it has beautiful beaches. I've always dreamed of lounging on a tropical beach and listening to the relaxing waves of the ocean. I've also heard that they have some amazing seafood restaurants on the beaches that serve tasty fresh seafood. Oh shit, I can't think of a second detail. I'll just keep talking about the beaches. The beaches in my hometown are generally quite cold and rocky, so the warm sandy beaches in Bali are extremely enticing. Or if you do have your two solid details or reasons prepared, your answer could go something like this. One day I would love to go to Bali because it has beautiful beaches. I've always dreamed of lounging on a tropical beach and listening to the relaxing waves of the ocean. I've also heard that they have some amazing seafood restaurants on the beaches that serve tasty fresh seafood. Furthermore, Bali is known for its monkey forests that look delightful to visit. I've always wanted to pet a monkey and give it little treats, so I sincerely hope that I can visit one of their infamous forests one day. Do you see how much better that answer is instead of saying for two reasons or having those lame transitions of my first reason is and my second reason is? Stop wasting your time with overly complicated vocabulary. This is pretty self-explanatory. While yes, you are scored on the complexity of your vocab, you're also scored on other metrics such as your fluency, grammar, pacing, and topic development. So, in essence, the vocabulary is not a huge part of the score. If you try to use complex vocabulary that you're maybe not very confident with, there's a higher chance that you're going to use those words incorrectly, thus reducing your grammar score. Or maybe you'll pause and have some kind of hesitation around the word, which would negatively impact your flow and pacing score. Or you'll potentially waste time with those hesitations or trying to correct yourself, which will then reduce the time that you could have used for your topic development. So unless you're super confident using those vocabulary words, it would honestly behoove you to keep it a little bit more simple so that you can have increased accuracy. And finally, you just need to be realistic with your skill level and make the appropriate accommodations to do the best that you can. No matter how many YouTubers or teachers or courses or textbooks tell you that you need to speak at this specific speed and you have to include so many details and examples, if your English level and speaking speed are not up to par, those pieces of advice will not apply to you. This is especially true if you have a short time to prepare for the TOEFL exam. If you have a short amount of time to prepare, it's better to work with what you've got and just try to accommodate for your current skill and speed. If you tend to speak a little more slowly or have more pauses and hesitations in your answer, it's better to just do one good detail and example in your independent speaking answer rather than having two half-assed details with maybe no examples. And if your vocabulary is a bit limited, it would be better for you to focus on having good grammar, nailing down that timing, and having more simplified vocab in your responses. Here's the deal. At the end of the day, The TOEFL exam is intended to check your English comprehension. And though this may be difficult to hear, if your English level and TOEFL score are not high enough to meet the university's minimum standards, that's probably a sign that you would really struggle in that program and it might not be the best fit for you. If you continue to have a difficult time with the basic grammar and vocabulary necessary to answer the TOEFL questions, that's definitely a sign that you need to take a step back from your TOEFL preparations and instead focus on learning and reviewing the foundations of English language. And here's a little bonus tip for you. Don't worry about conclusions. In the TOEFL scoring rubric, there is no mention about whether or not you need to include a conclusion sentence. So instead, you should really focus your efforts on using that time to provide more details and examples. However, if you do find that you have a few seconds left over at the end of your answer and you need to fill it with something, have a few little conclusion templates ready to go that are around 5 seconds or less, just so you can fill up that time. For example, going along with those Bali answers, you could say, and that's why Bali is my dream vacation. That takes less than 5 seconds. And for the love of God, do not finish your answer by saying, so, yeah, that's it. You can do better than that. So I hope you found these TOEFL timing tips to be useful as you continue along your preparation journey for this tough English exam. And if you'd like some more personalized help, head on over to Cami'sEnglishCorner.com to book your one-on-one TOEFL prep lessons so that I can help you get the TOEFL score that you need to get into your dream university, or get your dream job, or move to another country, or for whatever reason you have for taking the TOEFL exam. I'll be there for you every step of the way along your TOEFL preparation journey. Happy studying, and I'll see you later.